What sort of benefits does cannabis hold medicinally for people who are suffering with cancer?
So in our clinic, we see a big success with pain management. So painkillers, replacing opiates, dangerous narcotics, very helpful with that. Safety level very high versus the other opiates. Mental health, PTSD, post-trauma, anxiety is again indications that we see a lot of success in cancer. Cancer, I think, is one of these unmet needs in the industry. That percentage of success, one of the statistics that came out is that 85% of cancer patients are reporting that cannabis is assisting and helping them, and it's higher than probably any other medicine out there.
Aviho, good to have you on. I want to try for people to put it into layperson's terms. People will hear the word cannabis and will go drug. I know this because the next guy on is a friend of mine, Robin Emerson, who has used it for his daughter. We'll get on to how it's available, NHS and all that. Can you explain as clearly as you can in layman's terms the difference between medicinal cannabis and other cannabis? That, I think, is a really important thing to explain to people.
So street cannabis, let's call it, is an agricultural plant that is grown with no regulation at all. Medicinal cannabis is produced in a pharmacy in the same standards of any other pharmaceutical medication. So dosing and ingredients and safety is all built in, and the doctor is prescribing it with proper dosing and care. So we're talking about safety of how do you really consume cannabis.
So given that we know it makes a difference to the most serious illnesses, we're talking brain tumours. In a minute, we'll talk to Robin about his daughter who had more seizures than you could imagine. Given that it makes a massive difference, what's the hold-up?
It's $1 million question.
How'd you answer it? I haven't got $1 million, but go on.
I would say that there's three main reasons. It's, first of all, if we're talking about pharmaceutical lobbying, obviously existing, have a lot of effect. It's very hard to patent cannabis versus a new chemical entity. That means that financial incentive of pharmaceuticals is not there. On top of it, it's replacing a lot of the best sellers, mental health medications, painkillers medications. So that's one big thing that we see. The other is stigma, sadly. Although all of these therapeutical effects that we know existing, there's a very strong years of stigma that this is a street drug.
So stigma, a pharmaceutical business that really is closing the door. I want to bring in Robin Emerson, a friend of mine, a medicinal cannabis campaigner. Robin, good to see you again, my friend. Can you just explain for people watching how you got involved in this campaign and why?
So I got involved through my daughter, who was born in 2016 with a rare chromosome deletion. And then from that chromosome deletion, she got a severe form of epilepsy. So Georgia would have had upwards of 30 seizures a day. And in 2017, when she was 1, she ended up in intensive care on 2 separate occasions, which the second occasion, they actually told us to take Georgia home to die. And there was nothing more they could do for her. So that's what set me on my course to find something to help with Georgia's seizures. Thankfully, I came across medical cannabis. And now George is a 7-year-old, happy, thriving child.
Wow. Can we talk about the availability, gentlemen, of this cannabis? Is it, I mean, did you, Robin, find you could get it on the NHS? Do you have to go private? Because what Aviho is saying is that frustration that seems to be being blocked. How did you get it for Georgia?
Yeah, we had to get it privately. Thankfully, there was a doctor at the Portland Hospital who became the first doctor to prescribe medical cannabis in the UK once we changed the law in 2018. And she really put her head above the parapet to do that. But, you know, I can clearly say it wasn't easy for her. At that time, she was actually getting threatening emails from other colleagues who were telling her that her career was going to be over and she would never work again. She would be a laughing stock. All these various emails were being sent to her to threaten her and her career. Yet we can see now, 5 years later, since George has been on her medication, George is thriving, George is alive, whenever every other medical professional said that Georgia shouldn't be here today.
And Avihu, that won't be a unique, isolated story there, Robbins. No. Clearly there's a product here that works for somebody who desperately needs it, and yet there are all these barriers in the way. Where does the law stand at the moment in the UK on medicinal cannabis?
So I would say that the current situation is that cannabis is available in private clinics.
Right.
There's several private clinics. We have a private clinic and trying to really give access to people. But the current situation is causing a disparity between people that can afford private healthcare and people that can't. And if you can't afford private healthcare, you need to pay to a private consultation, and you need to pay for the medications from your own body, from pocket. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we see here.
How expensive is it?
Yeah, good point. Go on.
A consultation will be around £80, and
But the product itself?
Yeah, the product itself usually can end up anywhere between 200 to even 400 pounds a month.
Can I read something from Sean? An advanced clinical practitioner, before anybody says anything, has just contacted the show. He says, say this to Aviho, we give people diamorphine every day, which is essentially heroin. What the hell is the difference? That's a really interesting point.
Yeah. The statistic today is that 3 million Brits are on opiates daily. Opiates is a drug that we know is highly addictive, and it's almost impossible to really get out of this opiates challenge that we have in this country.
And we look over to America, where there's such a huge crisis. Forgive me, I hope I'm not sounding tinfoil hat and conspiracy theorist here, but is this, it seems to be pointing towards Big Pharma. That's the main issue
They
here.
don't want their market.
They don't want their market to be ruined by something that could be relatively cheap
That's
to
not
replace
conspiracy.
it.
I think that's a fact.
No? Good.
I think if you're looking today on the NICE guides, they basically saying, well, for having a pharmaceutical, you need to invest tens of millions to do a full clinical trial, to build this robust clinical trial, and then you can bring a medication to the market. But the problem is that people here, majority of the patients we have today are consuming cannabis in this raw form or a tincture oil. That means that this cannabis have hundreds of active compounds. You cannot take something like that through a clinical trial.